Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. God has given us unlimited treasures in His Word. Every time we open it, we can discover a new treasure or admire an old one. What will we find today? Here's Carla Early with Treasure Hunt in the Word.
Before I really started studying the Bible, I wondered why Jesus kept doing things that antagonized the Jewish authorities. It really seemed like He did things just to annoy them or stir them up. Now, my mom grew up in a household of mostly girls, 7 of them. And for some reason, unknown to me as an only child, they loved to stir things up and pester one another. My mom would try pestering me, and I'd just look at her like she was crazy and say, "Why'd you do that?" I guess I had too much of my dad in me to get upset. But he did the same thing when he was a kid. He'd pester his older brother Harold and then run, knowing he could always outrun Harold. And I found out my kids did the same thing without being taught. To this day, if I ask my daughter why she did certain things growing up, she'll say, "Oh, that was just to annoy David." So when I was reading along in John 5 about Jesus healing the man at the pool of Bethesda, I started out rejoicing along with the man as he picked up his mat and walked, until I got to the end of verse 9, where it says, "And that day was the Sabbath," because I knew what was coming. The Jewish leaders were gonna get mad. I kept thinking, seriously, Jesus, the poor man had been in this condition 38 years. One day more or less wouldn't have hurt. But Jesus doesn't do things on the spur of the moment. This was deliberate. He chose this man and this timing on purpose. And many of His acts today, we may never know all the whys and wherefores, but we can know that He was not just doing it to annoy the Jews. Jesus didn't heal simply to make someone physically well. In this story, He deliberately chose the Sabbath to heal and deliberately told the man to take up his bed and walk on the Sabbath, perhaps just to get the attention of the Jews and start a confrontation about their man-made laws that they'd burdened everyone with to demonstrate their false righteousness. They had a list of 39 rules just of types of work forbidden on the Sabbath. For example, under the heading, "Don't carry a burden," they said even a hanky had to be pinned to your clothing or else you're carrying it. God's original rule was keep the Sabbath holy by doing no work, so people would deliberately rest and spend time with Him. But they replaced God's intentions with burdensome traditions that totally missed the point. Their man-made rules made it more work to keep the Sabbath laws than to do a day's work. When I was in college, someone explained it like this. Suppose one of the original rules on campus was, don't jump off the roof of the Johnson building. The reason being that it was dangerous and you could die. It's a good rule. But each generation of the administration added to that rule. The first generation said, don't get on the roof. Obviously, if you don't get on the roof, you can't jump off. The next generation added that you couldn't climb the staircase to the roof, because if you couldn't get on the roof, you had no business on the stairs, right? But then there's that problem of those who lived on the 3rd floor and could see the stairs and be tempted to break the rule and climb them, so the next generation made the rule that no one should even go onto the 3rd floor. On and on it went, until no one was allowed into the Johnson building. Kind of crazy, right? So Jesus did this and other miracles on the Sabbath to show how far the man-made rules had gotten from God's intended commandments. Not only with Sabbath laws, but all of them. He didn't let legalism hinder His compassion. The object of the law was to keep the Sabbath holy. And what's holier than a miracle from God on the Sabbath? The Jewish leaders, however, only saw the broken rule, not the glory of God in this healing that changed a man's life forever. And we'll look at that a little bit tomorrow. We don't necessarily have a written rule book that we follow and expect others to follow too. But I think as Christians, we can be quite pharisaical about our expectations. We tend to look down on people who worship differently than we do, who weren't trained to dress a certain way or act a certain way in church, who aren't as faithful in coming or participating as we are. There's so many little things that we may not even realize we judge people for. And when we do that, we totally miss the point. As you go to church this week, ask yourself, how do I judge the people around me? Where could I show more compassion, like Jesus?
You can contact us at treasurehuntintheword@gmail.com. We'd love to hear the treasures God has given you through His Word. You can listen to other episodes on our website, which you can find in the description below. Thank you for listening, and remember, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.